In the shadow of America's towering skyline, a quieter crisis is taking shape. One unfolding not on trading floors or in corporate boardrooms, but in living rooms, grocery aisles, and kitchen tables across the nation. The numbers are stark. Credit card delinquencies, balances more than 90 days behind, have surged to 12.4%, a level unseen since 2011. A record $1.23 trillion now sits on the nation's credit cards, a symbol of households stretched past their breaking point. Behind every percentage point is a family making impossible choices: food or rent, medicine or fuel, power bill or remaining in good standing with the bank. Despite political promises to ease the cost of living, the American household is tightening under pressure. Rising costs of food, cars, utilities, and basic necessities have turned routine expenses into structural burdens. The government's response, including tariff reversals on imported food and proposals for cash payments funded by tariff revenue, signals a recognition that the affordability crisis has deepened, not eased. Yet such measures confront a slowing labor market, climbing unemployment, and the growing fragility of lower-income households. Economists warn of a possible chain reaction. Once a borrower falls behind on one obligation, the struggle often spreads to others. Mortgage stress, car loan defaults, declining consumer confidence, a potential domino effect that could pierce the broader U.S. economy. This is not merely a story about debt. It is a story about the United States at an inflection point. An economy that appears strong from afar may be hiding fractures that ordinary citizens feel every day. And as those fractures widen, they pose urgent questions about policy, politics, and the real state of the American middle and working class. 1. The households under pressure. America's new working class crisis. In every corner of the United States, from the crowded apartment blocks of New York to the sprawling suburbs of Ohio and the rural stretches of Texas, American households are quietly entering a financial storm they didn't create and can no longer outrun. For years, rising prices were dismissed as temporary, a necessary correction, a passing phase. But for millions of families, the temporary has calcified into a chronic, grinding reality. The cost of living has outpaced the cost of surviving. The numbers tell part of the story. A 12.4% 90-day delinquency rate on credit card balances is more than a statistic. It is a collective cry. It reflects families who once paid their bills on time now facing structural choices. Buy groceries or cover the minimum payment, repair the car needed for work, or let the electricity bill roll into next month. What was once a juggling act has devolved into triage. These households are not behaving irresponsibly. They are drowning in necessities. The average American has seen wages rise on paper, but inflation has devoured the gains. Food prices remain stubbornly high. Car insurance, now at its highest average cost in 47 years, eats into monthly budgets. Rent has climbed faster than incomes in more than 70% of U.S. counties. Utilities, once predictable, now fluctuate unpredictably as energy markets adjust to global disruption. Every aspect of life has grown heavier. For lower-income workers, especially those in service industries, the pressure is magnified. Many juggle multiple jobs with unstable schedules, no benefits, and limited union protection. They carry the economic weight of two realities: stagnant incomes and rising financial obligations. And when a household already stretched thin encounters one unexpected event, a medical bill, a loss of hours, a broken appliance, delinquency becomes not a lapse, but an inevitability. In counseling centers across the country, experts report a shift, not from overspenders or the financially reckless, but from families who were once stable, now destabilized by forces beyond their control. Counselors describe people breaking down, not because of luxury spending, but because the price of milk, rent, and transportation have turned basic life into a financial puzzle with no solvable outcome. For many, credit cards are no longer tools of convenience. They are lifelines, bridges between paychecks, safety nets that have now become traps. With interest rates averaging over 20%, debts compound faster than families can pay them down. The moment a household misses a payment, the snowball forms. Late fees, penalty interest, lower credit scores, higher borrowing costs. A downward spiral. Behind closed doors, families ration groceries, delay medical visits, and cut back on child-related expenses that once felt non-negotiable. Vacations, home repairs, and even modest pleasures have all been postponed indefinitely. A growing percentage of Americans can no longer afford what was once considered the baseline for a middle-class life: stability. And as rents, insurance, and groceries continue climbing, more households will cross the line into delinquency, not from carelessness, but from exhaustion. This crisis is reshaping identity. The proud working class of America, the backbone of national productivity, now measures its resilience not by prosperity, but by survival. Their struggle is the first crack in a much larger fault line forming beneath the U.S. economy. And as these households falter, the consequences ripple far beyond their front doors. 2. A fragile labor market. When job growth can no longer absorb the shock. For more than a decade, the U.S. labor market was heralded as one of the country's greatest strengths, a resilient engine capable of weathering global volatility, pandemics, and geopolitical disruption. Job growth was steady, wages were gradually rising, and unemployment hovered near historic lows. But beneath the surface of these optimistic headlines, weaknesses were quietly accumulating. And today, those once invisible fractures have begun to surface. The unemployment rates climbed to 4.4%, up from 4.1% the previous year, may seem modest. But in labor economics, trend lines matter more than point measurements. A rising rate signals that the market's capacity to absorb new workers or keep existing ones is weakening. Add stalled job growth, and the picture becomes clearer. The engine is losing power. For millions of Americans living paycheck to paycheck, even small fluctuations have immediate painful consequences. The most vulnerable workers, service employees, part-time laborers, gig workers, and low-wage staff are the first to feel the tremors. They rely on industries highly sensitive to consumer spending: retail, hospitality, transportation, and food services. When household finances tighten, these sectors experience immediate contractions. Fewer restaurant visits, less discretionary shopping, more canceled travel plans, and job insecurity grows with every empty table or quiet checkout line. In manufacturing regions, the situation is equally precarious. Supply chain patterns, still reshaping themselves after years of pandemic disruption, are pushing factories to reduced hours and unpredictable shifts. Employers avoid layoffs for as long as they can, but rising production costs and reduced exports strain their balance sheets. Workers accustomed to stable, lifelong manufacturing jobs now face shorter work weeks, the modern warning signal before full layoffs. And while political debates center on tariffs and trade reform, economists quietly warn that protectionist pressures may further destabilize industries reliant on global inputs. When food import tariffs were suddenly reversed in an effort to lower grocery prices, it wasn't just a political shift, it was an admission that jobs linked to import-reliant sectors were now entangled in the country's affordability crisis. But the true danger lies in how the labor market interacts with household debt. When jobs are plentiful and wages steady, families can usually keep up with financial obligations. The system functions. But once job stability weakens, the delicate fabric unravels swiftly. Workers who lose hours or employment begin postponing payments. First the credit card, then the car loan, then the rent or mortgage. One missed paycheck becomes 3. A single late fee becomes a cycle of penalties. Federal Reserve Governor Christopher Waller's warning that low-income households are struggling with mortgage and auto payments is not just an analysis. It is a flashing red light. Homes and cars are not optional assets. They are foundations of livelihood. A delinquency on these essentials signals that the labor market no longer provides a consistent buffer against economic shocks. Job loss does not occur in isolation. It affects everything: health outcomes, mental well-being, children's performance in school, local tax revenues, and even neighborhood stability. When enough workers in a community lose employment or hours, the entire local economy begins to contract. Grocery stores sell less. Medical clinics see more unpaid bills. Local governments collect less revenue. Teachers observe higher student absenteeism as families relocate or scramble for childcare. Economic decline becomes a community event, not an individual misfortune. Even among currently employed Americans, insecurity is rising. Surveys show workers reporting greater anxiety about job stability than at any time since the post-2008 period. Employers, nervous about economic uncertainty, delay pay raises, reduce overtime, and freeze hiring. Aspiring homeowners pause their plans. College graduates accept lower-wage positions simply to avoid unemployment. The labor market, once a ladder, begins to resemble a treadmill. Lots of movement, but not much upward progress. When the labor market becomes fragile, the entire economy becomes exposed. Household delinquency rises not because people are irresponsible, but because the jobs that once anchored them are no longer the reliable shield they used to be. And if job losses accelerate, the financial cracks already spreading across American households could expand into a national fissure. 3. Banks on the edge. What rising delinquencies signal about financial stability. In the polished conference rooms of Wall Street and the risk analysis departments of regional banks, a quiet unease is spreading. Rising delinquencies are not merely indicators of household stress, they are early warning signals for the financial system itself. For banks, credit card portfolios are like weather vanes. They turn sharply when the economic winds shift. And today, those vanes are pointing toward turbulence. A 12.4% delinquency rate on credit card debt is not just a historical comparison to 2011. It is a structural alarm. During the past decade, banks operated in an environment defined by low interest rates, steady employment, and predictable consumer behavior. Models were built on the assumption that defaults would remain manageable. But now, the assumptions have changed. The consumer balance sheet is deteriorating faster than many financial institutions anticipated. Credit cards, often viewed as high-yield profit machines, become high-risk liabilities when households fall behind. Interest revenues surge only if borrowers continue to pay. But once payments stop, banks face the costly process of collections, charge-offs, and capital write-downs. And here lies the deepest concern. Delinquency spreads like a contagion. Historically, when credit card defaults rise, auto loans follow, then personal loans, and finally mortgages, the largest asset class on banks' balance sheets. Federal Reserve Governor Christopher Waller's caution that low-income households are beginning to struggle with mortgage and car loan payments is not an isolated observation. It is the first ripple in what could become a broader financial wave. Auto lenders already dealing with record-high car prices and a used car market still distorted by pandemic shortages are reporting higher repossessions. Mortgage lenders, particularly those serving lower-income borrowers, report increased forbearance requests. These are the pressure points where a consumer crisis becomes a banking crisis. Small and mid-sized banks, the same institutions that support local businesses, fund mortgages, and anchor regional economies, are uniquely vulnerable. Unlike major banks that diversify globally, regional lenders rely heavily on consumer credit within their geographic footprint. When a local community experiences job losses, rising delinquencies, or population migration, the bank feels the impact directly. Their loan books become riskier, their liquidity tightens, and their cost of borrowing increases. All it takes is a cluster of counties experiencing distress for a mid-sized bank to face a solvency scare. The shadow of the 2023 regional banking crisis, when institutions like Silicon Valley Bank and Signature Bank collapsed, still looms over the industry. While today's crisis is rooted in consumer, not corporate instability, the mechanism of contagion remains the same: loss of confidence. When depositors fear their bank is weakened, withdrawals accelerate, liquidity tightens, banks sell assets at discounts, weakness becomes visible, not theoretical. Credit card delinquency is also a psychological shock for investors. Markets are forward-looking. When financial firms report rising defaults, analysts begin revising forecasts. Stock prices shift, bond spreads widen. Even strong banks are affected by the perception of risk. And perception in financial markets often moves faster than reality. Yet, the deepest long-term risk lies in tightening credit conditions. As banks see consumers falling behind, they respond predictably, reducing credit limits, raising lending standards, increasing interest rates, and declining loan applications. What begins as household distress becomes a credit supply shock. Families that relied on credit cards for basic expenses find themselves cut off. Small businesses see their credit lines shrink. Mortgage approvals fall. The economy, already strained, loses another source of oxygen. Credit contraction has cascading consequences. Consumers spend less. Businesses pause hiring. investors adopt caution, and banks prepare for the next wave of defaults by accumulating reserves, diverting capital away from lending and toward protective buffers. The entire system slows down not because of a dramatic collapse, but because thousands of small financial cuts accumulate into a deep wound. This is the quiet danger, a prolonged tightening cycle that drains the momentum from the economy, while families struggle to stay afloat. Banks are not on the verge of collapse, but they are entering a period of heightened sensitivity, reduced risk, appetite, and increased vulnerability. And as the financial sector braces for more defaults, the impact will echo far beyond boardrooms, affecting every American who relies on access to credit to navigate daily life. 4. The retail reality. How consumer spending patterns reveal economic distress. Across the United States, retail stores have long served as a living indicator of the nation's economic health. From the fluorescent-lit aisles of Walmart to the boutique storefronts lining urban centers, consumer spending has acted as a pulse, a measure of confidence, stability, and purchasing power. But recently, that pulse has weakened. Not abruptly, not dramatically, but steadily and unmistakably, mirroring the mounting financial strain within American households. The numbers emerging from retail chains and consumer surveys tell a unified story. Shoppers are tightening their belts, cutting back, and recalibrating their priorities. They are trading brand-name goods for private labels, delaying big-ticket purchases, and reducing discretionary spending in categories that once defined everyday comfort: dining out, clothing, home goods, and travel. Even grocery patterns have shifted. Consumers seek discounts, switch to cheaper proteins, buy fewer fresh items, and more frequently turn to bulk staples or processed alternatives. These buying choices reflect not trends, but survival strategies. When retail spending falls, the impact cascades across the economic landscape. Retailers are often among the first to feel the consequences of declining household liquidity. Slower foot traffic forces stores to scale back inventories, reduce staff hours, or cancel planned expansions. Major corporations issue cautious earnings forecasts, citing consumer fatigue and inflation-weary households. And while political leaders debate tariffs and price controls, the behavior of everyday Americans already reveals what policymakers have yet to fully concede. Affordability has become the nation's defining economic challenge. The reversal of tariffs on more than 200 food imports, a move designed to reduce grocery prices, underscores the severity of shifting consumer patterns. Food inflation hit households harder than perhaps any other category, because food is not optional. While the administration's decision may provide temporary relief on items like coffee, beef, and bananas, the broader retail reality exposes cracks that run far deeper. When a government begins unwinding its own core policies to relieve consumer pressure, it is not policy refinement. It is crisis management. Retailers, especially those operating on thin margins, now navigate a landscape where predictability, the lifeblood of inventory management, has disappeared. Families that once spent freely now shop cautiously, unpredictably. Payday cycles dictate shopping patterns more than seasonal trends. Every spike in rent, insurance, or utility costs siphons spending away. From retailers with almost surgical precision, retail executives describe a consumer who is present but exhausted, visiting stores but buying less, looking but not committing. And this shift is not limited to brick-and-mortar markets. E-commerce, once considered inflation-resistant due to its efficiency and low overhead, is experiencing its own slowdown. While online giants maintain steady traffic, average cart sizes have shrunk. Shoppers abandon purchases at higher rates. Buy now, pay later services, initially a convenience, have become crutches for consumers stretching their budgets, creating another layer of household debt that threatens to snap under pressure. This pullback in consumer spending reveals something even more concerning: a psychological shift. Americans are not merely cutting expenses because they must. They are bracing for worse. Consumer sentiment surveys, including the recent University of Michigan Index, show confidence falling to its lowest point since 2009. When fear overshadows optimism, spending shrinks not only because wallets are thinner, but because people anticipate future hardship. Psychology becomes economics. For retailers, adjusting to this mindset requires more than price cuts or promotions. It demands a recalibration of their business models. Many are increasing low-cost product lines, renegotiating with suppliers, and investing in discounting strategies. Others, particularly smaller local businesses, have no such flexibility. Their survival depends on stable consumer habits, and when those habits fracture, local economies follow. Vacant storefronts, reduced staff hours, shorter operating schedules. These become the outward symbols of inward economic distress. The decline in retail spending also acts as a forward indicator of broader economic slowdowns. When consumers pull back, manufacturers scale down production, logistics hubs become quieter, wholesale distributors reduce orders. From factories to freight companies to family-owned shops, the slowdown radiates outward. Retail is not merely responding to the crisis, it is amplifying it. In this environment, even temporary relief measures struggle to change long-term trajectories. Lower food tariffs may shave a few dollars off grocery bills, but they cannot reverse the structural erosion of household purchasing power. Until wages meaningfully outpace living costs, retail will continue to reflect the financial fragility of American life. The aisles of America are telling a story long before political leaders are ready to admit it. A story of shrinking carts, cautious choices, and families walking a financial tightrope with no safety net below. And the retail slowdown is not an isolated event. It is part of a larger mosaic revealing the true state of the country's economic foundation. 5. Political consequences, the cost of living crisis, and Trump's high-risk gamble. In Washington, economic pain is never just economic. It is political currency. And in election seasons, it becomes the battlefield upon which trust is earned, manipulated, or lost. For the Trump administration, the rising tide of delinquencies, falling consumer confidence, and intensifying affordability strain represent more than policy challenges. They are cracks forming in the political foundation that once secured the loyalty of millions of blue-collar and middle-income voters. Trump entered office on a powerful, resonant promise to bring down prices and restore financial dignity to everyday Americans. It was a message that cut across traditional party lines, speaking directly to the working-class frustrations that had simmered for years. Manufacturing workers, retail employees, service staff, and suburban families, they rallied around the belief that someone finally understood the suffocating weight of economic precarity. Yet, as prices for food, fuel, rents, and everyday essentials continued climbing, the promise began to erode. The administration's recent reversals, especially the dramatic exemption of tariffs on more than 200 food imports, reflect a political necessity rather than strategic refinement. Tariffs were once framed as tools of national strength, a cornerstone of Trump's vision for economic sovereignty. But when those very policies contributed to rising costs in the grocery aisle, the political costs became unavoidable. Backtracking on tariffs may reduce some prices, but it also symbolizes something more profound: the acknowledgement that earlier policies misjudged the fragility of household economics. Still, these reversals come with their own political risk. To many voters, especially those already skeptical, policy U-turns can signal inconsistency. To blue-collar households, they may read as desperation. And to political opponents, they serve as prime ammunition, proof that promises to tame inflation and reinvigorate the working class have not materialized. The crisis of affordability has created an emotional undertow that no single policy change can easily reverse. The proposed distribution of $2,000 checks to low and middle-income Americans, funded by tariff revenue, offers immediate relief but also carries a deeper political message. The administration understands the severity of the crisis but lacks the structural solutions necessary to resolve it. Direct payments can temporarily ease household pressure, but they do not address rent inflation, wage stagnation, or the rising cost of healthcare and insurance. And voters, especially those hardest hit, increasingly recognize this. Political strategists warn that a widening divide is emerging between two Americas, those insulated from economic turbulence and those living its consequences daily. In the second group, the workers, renters, single parents, and indebted households, resentment is building. Not ideological resentment, but practical resentment born from lived hardship. When voters struggle to keep the lights on, political narratives lose their power. When a family skips meals to pay the mortgage, partisan loyalty weakens. The University of Michigan's consumer sentiment collapse to its lowest point since 2009 is more than an economic indicator. It is a political signal. Voters unsure of their financial future become voters open to alternatives. Political historians note that consumer confidence often predicts electoral outcomes more reliably than campaign messaging, fundraising, or polling. When people feel poorer, the incumbent almost always suffers. At town halls and community forums, the shift is noticeable. Once enthusiastic supporters now ask sharper questions about inflation, wages, and the affordability of basic goods. They express frustration about being caught in the crossfire of policy experiments, tariffs, tax shifts, subsidies that never seem to stabilize their daily lives. And this frustration is bipartisan. Economic pain does not respect party lines. The administration faces an additional challenge: the narrative battle. Opponents frame rising delinquencies as proof that the American dream is slipping further out of reach. Economists emphasize that the climbing cost of living is not temporary, but rooted in structural issues: housing shortages, supply chain fragility, and a labor market unable to keep pace with inflation. Media outlets amplify stories of families falling behind, feeding a sense of national economic insecurity that policy reversals struggle to counteract. Yet the most significant political consequence may be psychological. When voters lose confidence in the economy, they also lose confidence in leadership. And once lost, political trust is one of the hardest currencies to regain. Trump's base, though resilient, is not immune to disappointment. Many supported him because they believed he understood their struggles in ways previous leaders did not. If that belief fades, the political landscape for 2026 and beyond could shift dramatically. The cost of living crisis has become the central political fault line of the moment. Every policy decision, every economic statistic, every headline about rising debt feeds into a narrative that reaches into the homes of tens of millions of Americans. And in those homes, not in the halls of Congress, the real political verdict will be delivered. 6. The domino effect. From household stress to national economic instability. Every major economic downturn in American history has followed a recognizable pattern. Early warning signs that appear small, isolated, or manageable, then gradually converge into a chain reaction that reshapes the entire national landscape. Today, the rising delinquency rates, weakening labor market, and contracting consumer spending are not separate crises. They are interlocking pieces of a larger economic puzzle. And if the pattern continues, the United States may be standing at the edge of a broader instability far more consequential than policymakers are prepared to acknowledge. The first domino has already fallen: household debt stress. When families run out of disposable income, they begin to rely on credit to cover essentials. When credit becomes unaffordable, delinquencies rise. And once households start falling behind, they reduce spending even further, creating a feedback loop that slows the entire economy. What began as personal financial strain morphs into a macroeconomic drag. But households are only the first link. The next domino is business contraction. When consumers tighten their budgets, businesses feel it immediately. Yet the consequences extend far beyond retail. Manufacturers cut production. Shipping companies reduce freight volumes. Restaurants reduce staff. Service industries shorten hours. Every sector connected to consumer activity begins to contract. Small businesses, which employ nearly half of all American workers, are often the most vulnerable. Their margins are thinner, their credit access is weaker, and their capacity to endure prolonged downturns is limited. Rising delinquencies do not just signal household stress, they predict business casualties. Then comes local economic deterioration. When enough businesses in a community struggle, the effects spill into public life. Tax revenues fall, local governments delay infrastructure projects, reduce public services, or cut education budgets. Community centers shrink hours, libraries reduce staff. What once were thriving neighborhoods can slip quietly into economic stagnation. And when communities weaken, they become less attractive to investors, accelerating decline. The next domino, and perhaps the most dangerous, is housing instability. The warning signs are already visible. Mortgage delinquencies and auto loan struggles among low-income households reflect a deeper vulnerability. Housing is the bedrock of American wealth, but also its greatest liability. When home prices soften or unemployment rises, even slightly, homeowners at the margins face impossible decisions. Missed payments lead to foreclosures. Foreclosures lead to neighborhood depreciation. And housing markets, once shaken, can send shockwaves across the entire financial system. Economists still remember the lesson from 2008. A consumer debt crisis, if left unchecked, can escalate into a full-scale financial meltdown. Today's situation is not identical. Lending standards are stronger and systemic risk is better monitored. But the foundation is once again showing cracks. Rising credit card delinquency is historically one of the earliest indicators of deepening financial fragility. Auto loans and personal loans follow. Mortgages follow after that. The pattern may differ in scale this time, but not in structure. Layered atop these economic dominoes is a growing psychological shift in the American public. Fear alters economic behavior long before real hardship arrives. When consumers expect prices to rise or jobs to weaken, they spend less. When families expect instability, they save more, or try to. This collective shift in mindset slows economic activity in ways that no stimulus check or policy reversal can instantly repair. Psychology becomes a self-fulfilling economic force, and hovering over all of this is the international dimension. Global investors watch American delinquency rates and consumer sentiment as indicators of U.S. economic momentum. As uncertainty grows, foreign investment becomes cautious. Bond markets react. International trade partners prepare for reduced American demand. In a globalized era, domestic economic fragility reverberates worldwide. Yet perhaps the most overlooked domino is the intergenerational impact. Today's rising costs hit the youngest and oldest Americans hardest. Younger adults delay home ownership, marriage, and starting families because they cannot absorb the financial risk. Older Americans, meanwhile, face shrinking retirement security as medical bills rise and fixed incomes fail to cover basic essentials. Without robust generational turnover, economic dynamism slows. Innovation declines. The labor force shrinks. The national economic engine, built on productivity and demographic renewal, sputters. As the dominoes continue to tilt, the nation inches closer to a critical threshold. Not a recession necessarily, but a structural slowdown that reshapes the contours of American life. A country where household debt becomes a way of life, not a temporary stopgap. Where consumer spending can no longer anchor economic growth. Where political divisions deepen as economic frustrations become more personal, more emotional, more urgent. This is the danger of ignoring early signs. The crisis does not erupt, it accumulates, quietly, gradually, invisibly, until the dominoes finally fall in unison. As the United States grapples with rising household debt, weakening labor markets, and mounting financial strain, the lessons are clear. Economic stability is not guaranteed, even in periods of apparent growth. First, the fragility of everyday households is a critical early warning system. When families fall behind on basic obligations, it signals deeper structural vulnerabilities that can ripple through the entire economy. Second, policy interventions must be timely, targeted, and structural, not temporary or symbolic. Tariff reversals or one-time cash payments may provide relief, but they cannot substitute for sustained wage growth, affordable housing, and accessible health care. Finally, the interconnectedness of debt, consumer behavior, and market confidence underscores a central risk. Small disruptions can cascade, creating systemic stress. For policymakers, investors, and citizens alike, the warning is unmistakable. Without careful monitoring and proactive measures, localized financial distress can escalate into a nationwide economic and social crisis.